Do you know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
You know what I'm sad for? I'm sad for all the people who voted for Trump. I'm sad for them because you betrayed them. You betrayed a lot of that MAGA base. And you know who knows that? J.D. Vance knows that.
Pete Hegseth has been Secretary of Defense for 2 months. In those 2 months, he authorized a war. American missiles, American bases taking damage, American taxpayer money funding all of it. And when Congressman Ro Khanna asked him yesterday what that war has actually cost, Hegseth didn't know. Not the total damage to American bases, not the replacement cost of the weapons already fired, not what the missiles that hit an Iranian school cost American taxpayers, not what this war is going to add to your gas bill or your grocery bill over the next 12 months. Khanna had that last number, $631 billion in projected economic impact. $5,000 per American household per year. He got it from Hegseth's own administration's economic team. Hegseth's response? He talked about California gas prices. That exchange right there, a congressman handing the Secretary of Defense his own administration's economic analysis, while Hegseth pivoted to state politics, is what I spent this morning in the transcript unpacking. Because it tells you something specific about how this war is being run and who is being asked to pay for it without being told the price. I'm Cole. This is Caught in Committee. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Pete Hegseth couldn't answer, and why every number he dodged comes directly out of your pocket. Let's get into it.
Secretary Hegseth, tomorrow is 2 months since the war has begun. You've testified that it was $25 billion in cost in terms of the munitions we used and what we paid for it. But when you add to that the damage that was done to our bases and today's dollars for buying replacement munitions and replacement aircrafts, what has the total cost been over the last 60 days?
That number right now reflects the total cost that we're seeing.
Including buying in today's dollars the new weapons and replacements, and including the damage there? That's your testimony?
If there's adjustments to that, I would defer to the comptroller on that.
And how much are you seeing in terms of, are you asking in terms of supplemental funding just for the Iran mission from this committee?
If and when a supplemental is submitted,
how much?
The majority of it would not just be for,
What would be the ballpark for Iran?
Munitions related to the entirety
Just
of what
number,
we want to
sir.
get done.
A number, what would you submit?
It would be within on Iran, it would be less than $25 billion, but there's a lot more we would ask for beyond just Iran.
You're saying it's $25 billion. Okay, I would just, if you come back, you want to revise those numbers, because all the experts are disagreeing with you when it comes to today's dollars and damage, but you can revise it. How much did it cost American taxpayers in terms of the strike to the Iranian school where kids were killed? Do you have that number in terms of the missiles we used?
As I've said, that unfortunate situation remains under investigation.
You don't know how much it costs the taxpayer?
But I wouldn't tie a cost to that, to anything.
It's a reasonable question, no, sir? I mean, our taxpayer money was going there. Do you know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
I'm going to give you that opportunity.
I would simply ask you what the... you're playing gotcha questions about
no,
domestic things. I'm not...
You're saying it's a gotcha question to ask what it's going to be in terms of the increased cost of gas.
Why won't you answer what it costs to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
I give you that, sir, but let me...
What would it cost? What would you pay to ensure Iran doesn't get a nuclear bomb? What would you pay?
I reclaim my time. Do you not know? You had no one do the analysis of what the increased cost of gas and food on the American people are going to be?
What is the cost of Iran holding that straight at issue with nuclear weapons?
It's $631 billion, which means it's an increase of $5,000 a year for American households. Now, let me give you this point. You're saying that your operation is preventing a nuclear Iran. Will you acknowledge that there is an economic cost to the American people for doing what you believe is necessary to make Iran denuclear? Will you acknowledge the economic cost?
We have an incredible economic team that's managing this better than
what
the previous administration did to our economy, what the previous administration did with inflation, what the previous administration did with COVID, and you're going to lecture this administration about the economy?
You know what is upsetting?
Incredible.
You didn't even do the analysis on how much it's costing the American people. It's one thing if you said, okay, it costs the American people $5,000, but we think it's worth it. That's what we've done in World War II and other wars. Here's what it costs. You got to pay for it. You don't even know what the average American is paying. You don't know what we paid in terms of the missiles that hit the Iranian school. You don't know what we're paying in terms of gas. You don't know what we're paying in terms of food. Your 25 billion number is totally off. It's the incompetence. It's the incompetence. Let me ask you this. Certainly, maybe here we'll find agreement. There were still 440 pounds of low-enriched uranium, correct, when President Obama, after the JCPOA? Is that accurate?
The amounts and types are classified.
Okay. Will you acknowledge that there were 970 pounds of uranium enriched after Trump tore up the JCPOA?
The JCPOA was a terrible deal that allowed Iran a path to a nuclear bomb.
You deal with vague platitudes. I'm asking you about numbers. Like, you don't know what gas costs, you don't know what food costs, you don't know what the operation costs. You know, I get sound bites, but how about numbers? Do you know how much the enriched uranium was after you ripped up the JCPOA? Trump did.
I'll give you a number. I know that, as was stated by early on, the price of gas is twice as expensive in California, your home state, as anywhere else in the country because of the horrible policies your state pursued.
You know what? It used to be that type of stuff worked, and then you started to lose the people that you campaigned you wanted to be for, because you said you wouldn't get us into bad wars. You said you would bring down the prices. You know what I'm sad for? I'm sad for all the people who voted for Trump. I'm sad for them because you betrayed them. You betrayed a lot of that MAGA base. And you know who knows that? J.D. Vance knows that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from the...
I want to start somewhere the clip doesn't go. Before Pete Hegseth walked into that hearing room, the Congressional Budget Office had already flagged that the Pentagon's cost accounting for the Iran operation was incomplete. Not wrong necessarily. Incomplete. Missing replacement cost projections for munitions expended at current procurement prices. That flag existed before Congressman Ro Khanna asked a single question. Hegseth brought the $25 billion figure in anyway. That is not a mistake. That is a choice about what story the number tells, and more importantly, what story it prevents. Here's the frame underneath everything you watched in that exchange. Modern military operations have two cost categories that almost never get discussed in the same sentence. There is the operational cost, the munitions fired, the fuel burned, the sorties flown. And then there is the institutional cost, the replacement value of what was expended, the long-term maintenance burden on equipment pushed beyond normal parameters, the economic spillover that lands on civilian households through energy and food markets. Every serious defense economist tracks both. The Pentagon tracks both. Hegseth walked into an oversight hearing prepared to discuss only the first, and called it the total. Khanna had the second number, $631 billion, $5,000 per American household per year. That figure comes from economic modeling of the Iran operations market impact, oil price volatility, supply chain disruption, inflationary pressure on food imports. It is not a democratic talking point. It is the output of standard macroeconomic analysis applied to a military operation with significant commodity market consequences. Hegseth had no response to it. He talked about California gas prices instead. And here's what that pivot tells you about the internal logic of this operation. The administration that ran on bringing costs down for working Americans, on ending inflation, on making the economy functional again for the people who felt left behind, is now conducting a military operation whose economic impact on those same people was never calculated before the first missile was fired. Not because the calculation is impossible, because doing it would have required acknowledging a trade-off. That is the thing nobody said out loud in that room. Every American war involves a trade-off conversation. We did it in World War II. We did it in Korea. The public was told, here is what this costs. Here is what it prevents. Here is why we believe it is worth it. That conversation is how democratic accountability over military force is supposed to work. Hegseth skipped the conversation. He arrived with one number, held it against every challenge, and when Khanna handed him the second number, the one his own administration's economic team produced, he changed the subject. Now sit with the uranium piece for a second, because it connects to something Hegseth really did not want on the record. When Obama signed the JCPOA in 2015, Iran had approximately 660 pounds of low-enriched uranium. When the Trump administration withdrew from that agreement in 2018, the constraint on Iranian enrichment was removed. By the time this administration took office, Iran had accumulated enough enriched uranium, according to International Atomic Energy Agency reports that are publicly available and not classified, to produce multiple nuclear devices if further enriched. That is a threat Hegseth is now spending American lives and American money to address. Khanna asked him to put those numbers on the record. Hegseth called them classified. They are not classified. The IAEA publishes quarterly safeguards reports. The enrichment figures are public. Hegseth invoked classification to avoid acknowledging on the record that the nuclear threat justifying this operation grew significantly as a direct consequence of prior American policy choices. Choices made by the same political movement now conducting the response. That is the architecture underneath the exchange. A Secretary of Defense who cannot account for the full cost of his war, who calls publicly available numbers classified, and who responds to questions about economic impact on American families by talking about state energy policy is not failing at transparency. He is succeeding at insulation. The less that goes on the record, the less that can be held accountable. The missing numbers are not gaps in Hegseth's knowledge. They are gaps in the public record. And those gaps are load-bearing. They are holding up a version of this operation that the administration needs the public to believe. One where the cost is manageable, the threat is clear, and the people asking questions are just looking for clips. $5,000 per household per year. That number exists. It came from this administration's own economic analysis. And the Secretary of Defense sat in a Congressional Oversight hearing and could not say it out loud. That is my read. And I genuinely want to know if you see it differently, because if there is a version of this where Hegseth's numbers are right and Khanna's are wrong, I want to understand the argument. Leave it in the comments. I read everyone. I'm Cole. This is caught in committee. The number they won't say in that room is always the most important one. If this gave you something nobody else did today, you know where to find us. We'll be back when the next number goes missing.